All right, everyone, welcome back to a new episode of EV Obsession. I'm your co host, Joe Boris, here as ever with my fellow co host, Zachary Shahan. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. We're going to do more of a deep dive into fewer stories just because there's some big stories happening right now. And we're going to start off with the biggest EV story of the week. Tesla is supposed to begin deliveries of its Cybertruck as early as tomorrow.
Yes, well, we don't have a lot of detail. We have Elon tweeted that Tesla Cybertruck deliveries start Thursday, and that's it. The Tesla account on Twitter retweeted it, uh, and
There you go.
yeah. So the question is, like, what do we expect from this? There are a handful of rumors circling. Joe, what rumors have you seen?
So the rumors that I've heard is that they're only going to deliver 10 Cybertrucks at the event tomorrow. They're going to deliver 10 that are the first ones off the line. They're going to be kind of cherry picked a little bit in terms of who it's going to go to. And these are going to be, this is kind of a questionable thing. We don't know if this is true or not. It was in Business Insider was the one who first reported it. So it's not a completely uncredible source. I mean, Business Insider gets a lot of stuff right. But out of 2 million reservation holders, 10 feels like a small number. And then the real question is, are these going to be 10 vehicles that are, I don't want to use the term ringer, but are they going to be very specially handcrafted and meticulously gone over with quality controls? Or are they going to be kind of similar to like the original run of 2018 Model 3s and Model Ys that had sunroofs blowing off and bumpers falling off? Is it going to be, something that
Joe.
is perfect, or is it going to be something that's a little bit, maybe a little bit squirrely? We don't know.
Well, yeah. So we did talk about previously that they were going to be in showrooms and stores, I believe,
They
and we
are in showrooms, they are in stores. There was one example at Electrify Expo 2 weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving. So people have seen them, but the ones that are on display at the dealerships, they're roped off. People are
yeah,
not allowed to test drive them.
that's
The,
what
the the staff is not allowed to drive them. So it remains a question. Are these display vehicles? Are these show and display? Tesla did not allow anybody inside the Cybertruck at Electrify Expo. You were allowed to look at it, and then they shuffled it away before people started, the public started getting in and out of things. So they're playing this one close to the chest. Let's just put it that way.
yeah, well, that's what I was going to say because when we talked about it previously, we said, oh, they better if rope them off. I would rope them off, not let people touch them. Otherwise, there's going to be fingerprints all over that stainless steel. We got a little bit of pushback. I think one person I think thought we were being negative, but this is just the reality. Like if you're going to have them in the store, you probably want them roped off to some extent because they're gonna show fingerprints, and those are gonna
Right.
like show a lot. So I think it's not surprising. I think it's noteworthy. It's notable. But there's another reason why they also might be roped off, and that's I heard rumor that these are customer vehicles that will be delivered. The ones in showrooms are early customer vehicles. It's what I saw rumor of. So you wouldn't want people like all over your car if you ordered one of the first Cybertrucks, got one of the first Cybertrucks. Um, I also saw commentary that people like closely checked all the panels and everything. It was really nicely fitting. No issues there on that stuff. I mean, again, personally, I expect these are handmade and they were really carefully. It was really carefully checked that they would look good. I mean, I wouldn't
The
if I'm
showroom examples.
yeah, the showroom examples, which might be customer vehicles, but the point being that if they're going to be in showrooms and they're not in like a lot, like in my region here in Southwest Florida, you got to go to Tampa. You can't see one in the Sarasota store, So they're in major markets, so there's only a limited number, and I mean, I can't imagine it would be insane to put them out with issues that people could see, but these got to be handmade. I mean, these are like early, and if they're only delivering 10, I mean, maybe that's just at the event and there's a lot more going to go out through the service centers.
Yeah,
But
it remains to be seen, right? Because they're still talking about having issues at scale. On the Tesla earnings call early in November, when Musk very famously said, "We dug our own grave with Cybertruck." They're still
yeah,
talking about having problems proportionate with how many new things that they're trying to solve at scale, right? So this is still something that they're talking about as if scale production is not yet happening. That may not be the case. They may come out tomorrow and say, "We've solved it. We're building 1,000 a day." God bless them if they do. But they're still talking about it in very hushed, very reserved tones. And you get the feeling that the whole industry is watching this to kind of see what happens. I don't think, I mean, let's just get this on the table. We would not have today news of an electric Silverado. We would not have a plug-in hybrid Ram. We would not have a Ford F-150 Lightning if the Cybertruck announcement had not happened, and if the demand for an electric pickup had not seemingly been there with 2 million reservations. So now it's time to see, are these 2 million reservations real, especially as people start taking delivery of this thing. And yeah, there's so many questions here that are going to be answered tomorrow. It's really tough to say, but I
and
think
so
there's
many
going to
that
be,
won't be answered tomorrow too.
well,
So
and that's exactly what I was going to say next. But I think we need to talk about the ones that won't be answered tomorrow. And I think there's a very critical question that needs to be answered, which is going to be, how are these going to hold up? You can sit there and say it's made of stainless steel and that it's dent resistant and bulletproof and all this other nonsense, but rocks hitting it, scratches, fingerprints, bird droppings, just being parked in the sun and having the UV radiation on it. It's going to be really interesting to see what these look like. Not at delivery. That's going to be interesting too. But 6 months down the road, a year down the road with 15, 20,000 miles on them, how are these going to hold up?
well, there weren't a lot of them, but there were the DeLoreans, which you could sort of, I mean, since you're as old as Father Time, you can tell us what it was like when the DeLoreans were all over the place, but how they looked. I mean, I've seen one at Target a few times near me recently, and I mean, it looks fine. It doesn't look new, but it looks fine. But yeah,
I
bird
think you're
dropping,
talking
sap, those kind
about,
of things are interesting. Do you know
yeah,
how bird droppings and sap affect the steel?
no, I don't. But
Yeah,
I will say this. There's a big difference, I think. Could be wrong. We'll find out in the comments. There's a big difference in the way that a exotic mid-engine two-seater vehicle
yeah.
that is bought by an enthusiast and squirreled away and probably wiped down with a diaper and cared for like a child for 40 years is going to be treated. And then there's how
There's no need
a,
to make fun of me, Joe. I
fair
mean,
enough. But I think that whoever's buying that DeLorean loves it. They've made a choice to take care of it, maintain it, and everything else. Someone who's buying a pickup truck may not have the same care or may not baby it in the same way that the DeLorean is driven, especially something like this, something that's meant to be fast, something that's, they talk about being the toughest thing. Somebody's going to buy one of these and immediately go into their driveway and fire a gun at it. And they're going to shoot a bullet hole right through their own truck and then get flipped out because they were promised a bulletproof truck. That is going to happen probably in Texas, maybe in Arizona. But I
I gotta
really,
correct you though. I mean, you said someone. I think a couple thousand people will do this.
I fair enough. But I genuinely believe someone is going to get their Cybertruck, drive it home, talk about it being bulletproof. They're going to fire a round into it. If they're smart, maybe it's going to be a 22 LR. It'll ricochet off and kill their dog. If they're stupid, it's going to be a 50 cal and it's going to blow right through their brand new car. And they're not going to be able to repair it because they're not going to be able to get a new door or a new door panel for 6 to 8 months.
I thought you were going to say years because you got to wait for,
Well,
I mean, production to ramp up. I mean,
you gotta,
they're not going to replace doors while they're trying to ramp up production and use those doors. I mean, maybe if the doors are not the bottleneck
well, but
actually,
what's going to
but
happen if you're insuring this thing?
but I honestly am curious, like how many people go out there, shoot the truck, and get a ricocheted bullet in the leg? Like this is
can't wait.
I hope not, but geez,
You hope
you
not?
I hope not, but it's like I would almost put money on it.
Oh yeah, this gene pool needs a little
Like
bit more chlorine.
there's like you always highlight how Tesla owners like myself were not car guys before, and I was not. I mean, I've talked about like loving that, looking at shopping on the customize your Audi and BMW sites when I was in college, freshman in college, but that was the extent of it. And having Lamborghini posters on my wall in like middle school because that's what you could get at the book fair. That was cool. But
I had the Trapper Keeper. It was great.
yeah, I had a couple Ferraris, couple Lambos. I still don't even recognize myself thinking of that, but yeah, no, I think there's so my point was these are not necessarily truck buyers. They're not necessarily people who shoot guns and know a lot about guns. They might they might think, hey, this is bulletproof. Maybe it's time to get a gun and show how cool this is. I mean, I would
That's
not.
such
I
a
would put
great
money
point.
on people who get a Cybertruck. Some of them, some small number, going out and getting their first gun too. But I mean, that's what Elon is promoting, and a lot of people just follow Elon's messaging and his culture and all that
But
stuff.
do you think it's even going to be that ridiculous, or do you think it'll just be, hey, I'm going to drive this to my neighbor. He's got guns. Hey, Bill, why don't you take a shot at my Cybertruck and see if it kills me?
Exactly. There's that as well. So, and on that topic of who's going to be buying these, I mean, there's a lot of people enthusiastic about it, but there's a certain segment of super Tesla fans. Like I've seen like people who drove hours in the snow to see one in the showroom. Like,
yeah, there are Tesla super fans. And I think that if Tesla is smart and if Elon is smart, and there's no reason to believe that they are not super, super smart people, they are going to make sure they're going to cherry pick who gets the first examples in the same way that they've created a low pass filter to prevent people from complaining about full self-driving. They're going to cherry pick who gets these so that they're going to get rave reviews, even if it's trash.
Yeah, I mean, I expect that. And I still expect it's a great vehicle. I don't know what your expectation is. I think it's a great vehicle in a whole different kind of class. It's something like between a Hummer and an SUV and a pickup truck. It's like it's its own thing. It's clearly unique in multiple ways. And the biggest question I have, like that's going to strongly appeal to some people. But how far does it go? How far does creating your own class, having your own vehicle go? When it came out, I immediately thought, I had an article that Elon liked or laughed at. He gave 2 laughing emojis that I indicated that the Cybertruck would make a Ford F-150 Lightning look like a Barbie Jeep or something like that. And my friend David Havasi, who's worked at Tesla, he points out, paint is essentially nail polish. Like car paint is like nail polish. And it's like we're painting our cars in this, pretty paint like nail polish. Then we're upset if it gets chipped. And it's like, these tough pickup trucks are still like covered in paint or nail polish. The Cybertruck is a different animal. And I think it will appeal to a lot of people who want that kind of thing. But as time has gone on and it's been taking years to come out, I've just got the feeling more and more like it's narrowed. The appeal of the truck is narrowed to people who have a very specific draw to Tesla or a very techy Blade Runner vehicle design taste. And I don't see it as much anymore as like a straight up competitor to a pickup truck or something that's going to pull a lot of traditional pickup truck buyers to it. I think the segment of pickup truck buyers who are going to really be pulled to it is it's more niche than I originally thought for the first like year or something.
Yeah, I think the people who are looking at this from a fleet perspective, from a work truck perspective, have kind of dropped off, I think. And there's going to be people that do it. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be
Yeah.
contractors, there's going to be plumbers that, that buy these, and there's going to be upfitters that are going to build tool, some kind of tool body for it. How successful that'll be remains to be seen. But I do agree, this is not a conventional pickup buyer. I suspect, and this is just kind of my feeling, I think it appeals to the same sort of guy that used to buy Hummers in like 2007,
Yeah.
2006.
Yeah.
It's that H2 Hummer where it looked really ostentatious and big, but it wasn't as off-road capable as the H1 had been, as the original Hummer had been. It really just kind of played off that reputation. I am less convinced that it's going to be a great vehicle. I think there's some choices that were made, especially in the suspension department where they're running air suspension, that I think were made based on engineering, manufacturing, maybe, or maybe just preferences, Elon preferences that are not conducive to a great off-road / towing / pickup truck experience. But we'll see. I could be wrong.
I mean, I honestly I don't see it as being a popular off-road rural truck. I think there's going to be people who do that with it. Of course, there's people who do that with the Tesla Model 3. So there's going to be that, certain people, but I see it as being a rich suburban vehicle, something that maybe the wife has a Cadillac Escalade and the husband has a Cybertruck. Like that's the demographic I see it fitting the most.
What do you think the Venn diagram overlap is going to be between people who take Viagra and people who drive a Cybertruck?
Pretty high.
It's going to be high, right?
Very high. But also, I mean, I'm curious how it appeals to younger people, because Tesla was a huge hit with younger people. Tesla was a huge hit with younger people, and then the enthusiasm has trailed off, as we've discussed. Like, kids used to always be jumping Tesla, Tesla, Tesla. Now they do not care.
Yeah.
But younger people, there's only so many young millionaires, and younger people, they need money to buy this. And this is, I think the biggest probably differentiator between now and when it was released is going to be the price. Like, there was initially supposed to be a $40,000 version. If there's a $40,000 version, I could see a lot of people getting it. If the starting price is $60,000, I see it being pretty niche. And I mean, I just think Elon's initial comments, him saying, maybe if nobody wants this, we'll build a normal pickup truck. He knew, like, he had been working on it for a long time. It wasn't something they just suddenly plopped out. So he thought for a long time, how appealing will this be for the mass market? And he wasn't really confident. After all the reservations, that's something else, but that was a whole different era. Now his target is like 150,000 a year. That's still, to me, a niche. Like, that's not.
No, 150,000 is a huge number.
I mean,
that's
it's a big number
of cars.
But it's not like people. There's a lot of people who see it as being the most popular Tesla model. Now the Model Y is approaching like 1 million a year. It's not going to be close to Model Y popularity. Not even close, in my opinion. There's people who are so excited about it, they think it's going to be like Model Y popularity. That it's going to create a class that a lot of people, and everyone's going to love it eventually.
Yeah.
Let's
talk about a similar vehicle. I think that this appeals very much to the same type of person that likes a Jeep Wrangler, right? So two things. Number one, a Jeep Wrangler is probably going to be more affordable than this, a little bit more accessible, and a little bit broader appeal. Say those things. In 2023, Stellantis has sold 126,000 Jeep Wranglers. So this is going to be 15 to 20% more popular than a Wrangler. I have a hard time believing that.
But let me go back. So hard.
Hang on.
Yep.
And let me make a second point. The world was very different in 2019 when this was announced. And I don't mean COVID, and I don't mean the pandemic, and I don't mean any of that. I mean, we as Americans, we as people on this earth had a lot more spending power in 2019 than we do in 2023. The price of food has gone up. the price of rent, mortgage, utilities, fuel, energy has gone up. It has gone up significantly. And income, by and large, and we've talked about this in many contexts, has not followed suit. I don't know how many people who are on that waiting list, that 2 million strong waiting list, would be able to pull the trigger at 40,000, certainly at 60,000. But what if this thing comes in at 70,000 or 80,000? That's
Well,
going to be a tough sale.
and the first versions are, but the first
Sure.
versions are going to be the tri-motor high end ones. But yeah, no, I mean the thing is, it's just so hard to put it. Like I find the Jeeps sort of appealing, but I've never been interested in getting one. Like zero interest. Hummer, I hate. Would never get a Hummer. I still like the Cybertruck a lot. I do really like the Cybertruck. Like I am tempted to like, oh, I could have one, except for one thing, which is that I absolutely hate driving large vehicles, and it wouldn't fit in my garage, and like it would demolish my house. So, but I just, aside from that, I find it really appealing. I really like the futuristic, high tech, interesting angles, design of it, even the wheels. So I don't. It's hard to find like, and I know it's like the Tesla brand is part of that, got to be, but it's like I'm not eager to buy a Tesla necessarily right now. Like I'm not. It's not like I'm just looking for a good EV is sort of my mindset. So it's like it doesn't fit any of those categories. But I definitely agree with you. It seems like for when it gets to normal people, I mean, I should just take myself out of it. I'm not really normal with these things. So, but
No,
when it
you're
comes
not a
to,
normal. And I say that
no,
with love.
no, that's fine. I'm 100%. I used to always say I was weird in college and stuff. People are like, oh, don't say that. Don't say. I'm like, it's not. It's fine. I don't see it as a negative. It's just I'm weird. Yeah. But I just I don't know who the normal demographic is. Maybe it is primarily those Jeep type people. Although I see them being more conventional. Like when you get a Jeep, you're getting a conventional vehicle. Like that looks. I mean, I guess sort not you're not going too far outside the bounds. You see the more extremes are like the Hummer, like you said, or like a truck with gigantic wheels, like a high off the ground. Like that's sort of the kind of, I just don't see it being. I can't find the normal demographic who's like, yeah, I'm gonna get into this. We had the early Model 3 and Model Y buyers who were like the ones who will get Cybertrucks early, like just Tesla fans, hardcore. But after those waves, those vehicles appealed to a lot of mass market buyers, and they continue to. Like I continue to see people who have never had any interest in EVs or talk to me about EVs or show any signs of being different, getting a Model Y, getting a Model 3. So these people, the people I know who have gotten those Teslas, like I would not think for a second they will get a Cybertruck. Like that's not going to reach that market. So I'm just struggling to see like. So I don't know. We can move on. If there's more, do you have more to say about the demographic that might take to this in high volumes, or is that it?
I think we don't know. I
Yes.
think it's a shocker. I think it's going to be a question of what do they look like on the road. And I think that there's going to be just as many people who you would never think would buy one of these who's going to step into one.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's going to be people you're going to think, man, like,
Be like, wow,
let's
Mrs.
talk about this
Sandy
for a
got a
second.
Cybertruck.
The percentage of Jeep Wranglers that undergo 40 to 50 to $60,000 worth of upgrades is higher than you think. Something like I think 1 in 8 Jeep Wranglers gets modified, and something like 1 in 20 gets more than the original cost of the vehicle added to it in terms of suspension, wheels, body kit, stereo upgrades, off-road, axles, things like that. So there's big money in that Wrangler Bronco market, and this will take some of that. However, there's a lot of those guys who are never electric. They're going to die with their gas car. These were guys. So it remains to be seen. I think there's going to be a lot of guys that buy this that think it's just going to be the coolest thing, and there's going to be guys that buy this that are going to get laughed at because they seem like they're trying a little too hard. But I don't know. Those idiots haven't figured out that we're laughing at them in the Wrangler. Why would they figure out that we're laughing at them in the Tesla?
Yeah, I think these are great comments, and I like that you put the punctuation in your speaking. Even this is, as an editor, just love it. Adding the
No problem,
commas.
baby.
I'm sure everybody appreciates it. No,
However, comma
yeah. I
editing is
mean,
hard.
and let's just be honest. I mean, there's going to be a Mrs. Smith who ends up with a Cybertruck, and you're like, holy cow, Mrs. Smith bought a Cybertruck. There's going to be outside the norm buyers. Like, there's going to be people of every demographic who ends up with a Cybertruck. I know, yeah. So let's just put that out there. The question is which demographic in high volumes is going to buy it, and that's where we're very stuck. The next question with that is the production ramp up and repairability. I think you said it all probably earlier, but just there were significant signs from Elon on the last call that this isn't close to volume production, and it might be a year before they get to volume production. And that sort of seems like Elon's target, which is Elon's target, which means like maybe not. It depends on how challenging these problems we're wrestling with are. But when you combine that with like, you can't just go anywhere to get this repaired. What are your thoughts on Cybertrucks that fall off the side of a cliff or have been shot with a shotgun or whatever? Like, what are your thoughts on, or just get an accident? What are your thoughts on how that process is going to go for the next couple of years or few years?
I think it's going to be tough because it was hard to get parts and replacement parts and repair parts for Model Ys and Model 3s. And those were much easier to manufacture than this, right? I mean, if we believe what we are being told, which is a whole other conversation, that it is incredibly difficult to build this stainless steel body. We know it is difficult to repair. To your point about the DeLorean, we do have a little bit of knowledge about how this works. And DeLoreans are notoriously difficult to get dents and dings out of. They're notoriously difficult to get replacement panels for. It is not easy. You can't just Bondo it, patch it, do touch-up paint. None of that stuff exists in that world. You have to replace the panel. You have to weld stuff in there. It's tough. So I think number one, you're going to have an issue in getting the parts that need replaced. I think number two, you're going to have a bigger issue in that a lot of body shops do not know how to work with stainless steel. The training isn't there. So your only recourse, there's not going to be straightening or repainting. There's going to be replacement. And if Tesla doesn't have the parts available, that means these things are going to sit and they're going to wait. And, $40,000 new product, maybe you put up with that. $80,000, $100,000, $250,000, you're going to put up with that. There's a writer who's a friend of mine. He's a much better writer than I am. His name's Jack Baruth, and he writes for Road and Track and Hemmings, and he writes a lot of great comments. And years ago, he wrote a piece that really stuck with me. And he said that, Porsche thinks that they're going to be able to sell a GT3 and that the customer is going to have the same kind of patience or some kind of extra patience when that car goes sideways and need repairs. And the reality is that no, these people came up from Lexus, from BMW. They are attuned to the way that they are treated. They're attuned to the way that problems get handled, and they expect that from every company they interact with. And if this is somebody's first Tesla, I think it's going to be a really rude awakening, especially when this thing needs repairs.
All right, that's that on the Cybertruck. This is fascinating. So aside from the F-150 Lightning and the Chevy Silverado EV and the Rivian, it looks like we have another electric pickup truck coming to compete.
Yeah, so this is from Lucid. I mean, there's going to be a ton of vehicles out there in the coming years as we kind of explore this. But this looks like it's a prototype, maybe a styling buck from Lucid. You can see from the really thin C pillar, this is not something that is in any way ready to go to market. But it gives you the sense that Lucid is working on a pickup truck. And we know from their original stock filing that their plan has always been to launch with the Air and then come out with the Gravity and then explore other things. If this is something where they can use a lot of Gravity components, I think this will be something they can bring to market. I think there's going to be high demand for this in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East markets where Lucid is going to be strong. And I think something like this, to follow the way that Lucid thinks, which is we'll sell you a Tesla that's better than your Tesla. I think this is something that's definitely coming. I suspect it will be more aggressive than this, more aggressively styled, depending on the initial success of the Cybertruck. If the Cybertruck takes off and they start, meeting delivery markets or delivery targets, then Lucid will beef this up. They'll put AT tires on it. They'll put bigger fender flares on it. They'll put some more aggressive duct work in the hood and make it look a little bit angrier. But yeah, this is coming. It's not only coming from Lucid. You're going to see electric pickups from Toyota. You're going to see electric pickups from the American car makers, the American brands, rather. You're just going to start seeing more and more of this. And it's not necessarily a response to the Cybertruck. It's just the case that this is a huge, profitable market globally. And if you want to sell big volumes in Australia, if you want to sell big volumes in North America, if you want to, and then this will be a little bit of a segue later, if you really want to have some extreme visibility, even in South America, you need something like this. You need something pickupy.
Yeah, so a few things on the look. Yeah, I think right now it looks very cute, like a little too cute. And
Yeah, it's not
I
it's
think,
not aggressive enough. It's
yeah,
not a competitor
I think,
to the Cybertruck as it sits right now.
yeah. So I agree with you that it'll make it look a little bit beefy or whatever. But the the thing that sort of jumps out to me is I feel like it sits somewhere between the Rivian and the Cybertruck, because the Rivian appeals to a lot of Tesla fans, early Tesla owners. I think it looks far better in person than in pictures, but the headlight design is very different. It's very quirky. It just always makes me think of like Portland, Seattle. These markets. This like sleek like line on the front has much more of a Cybertruck look and feel to it. But then the body, the truck looks more like a premium, luxurious city pickup truck, like the Rivian sort of looks to me. So I sort of see it fitting like it's something with a cooler, edgier look to it, but the body, the truck itself is more like a Rivian. So I see it just sort of competing between those, like in that range, assuming this is what a Lucid and it's going to be look a bit like this. But yeah, I just think it's fun and fascinating to see how much the truck market might evolve with all these different versions of a truck. And I mean, also maybe how they might pull from a lot of SUV buyers right now who are in city suburban SUVs, and they might migrate to trucks. I'm curious your take, because you worked on cars at so many levels, like the kind of paint that's like on the bumper there, like what does that tell you about the stage of this? Or like it looks like there's
Well,
some paint bleeding over onto the bumper, like this was just painted in a sort of rushed weird way. Like, does that tell you anything about the stage of development or where this is at in development? Or
yeah, I mean,
I don't
this
even know if I
that's
see it right, but that's what it looks like to me.
yeah, I don't know that this is so. If you look at this, is what they would call a styling buck, right? So in the process of building these cars, it's changed a little bit in recent years, but in the process of going through the designs, manufacturers will use typically a high density foam with like a gel coat spray over it to mill out a three-dimensional model of the vehicle at 1-to-1 scale. In the old days, this was done with clay modelers. Sometimes clay is still used, but largely high density foam, a big 5-axis mill comes out and mills it out. And then the gel coat that's on there, sometimes it's sprayed on, sometimes it's wrapped, and they don't always do like the best job with it. Sometimes it actually, BMW used to use a cloth, like a special kind of cloth that they put over the clay models to try the different colors. So it's really interesting, but the giveaway here that that's what you're looking at and that this is not an engineered production model is if you look into the wheel well, you see that there's nothing there. This is just a styling model. If you look at the glass, it's not glass, it's just painted. You have a matte finish on the one closer, you have a glossy finish on the other one. This is just to give them a sense of what it's going to look like. And I suspect, I have no way of verifying this, I suspect that what you're looking at here is a response to the criticism of the Lucid Air, which I'm sure looks great in pictures and looked phenomenal in the 3D computer rendering. And then when they finally built one, they said, it looks kind of frumpy. It looks a little flat. So I think that they've kind of learned that lesson and said, we can't rely on the renderings to see what this is going to look like. We have to build them and walk around it and see how we feel about it. And that's what they're doing here. So I would say that this is fairly far along in the design conception, but in terms of engineering and everything like that, this doesn't tell us anything,
And
right?
so
This
if
could
someone,
be introduced as a roller. This could be introduced as something that they literally push out onto a stage.
yeah.
We don't know.
And I mean, because it's so early stage, any guess is going to be a wild guess. But I'm just curious if you were forced to guess, which I'm forcing you, how far do you think this is from production? I
I
mean,
think
again,
that
it could
so
be
so
a wide
let's
range.
call
You
the
can even give
belt
a big
line.
range.
Let's call the belt line, which is like the line of the side windows down. I think from the belt line down, this is probably pretty close. I think
But I mean, the
the
vehicle, like,
greenhouse.
yeah, the vehicle, like, how long?
Oh,
When
well,
do you,
they have a gravity. They have the gravity SUV. This is just a different body. This is a different body on the same skateboard. They could start building this in a week. They could announce this. Who the hell knows? But yeah, if they're building the gravity and any kind of numbers, they can build this right away. It's just a different body style of the same chassis, potentially. I'm not saying that's what they've done, but that's something they very much could do. I think styling wise, I don't think the windows are there. I don't think the greenhouse of glass, I don't think that's what it's going to look like at all. I think the C pillar is way too narrow. I think the door openings are the way that they've been drawn on there are super weird. I don't think that's right, but I think the overall shape is very lucid. It looks very similar to the gravity. I think they could. I think it's pretty close.
okay, my ballpark, wild, not informed, not well informed guess is 18 to 24 months before they start selling these. I mean, delivering these.
That would be interesting because if that's the case, Lucid might be in scale production of these before the Cybertruck, and they haven't even announced
Oh,
this
that's
yet.
that's I mean, that's where it gets interesting, yeah, in my opinion. If they did that, but so you want to put a range on it, or you're gonna?
I say 80%. I think it's 80% there.
But I mean, a range on when they would start delivering them.
Oh, they'll announce this. I think they'll announce this next year, early next year, 2024, Q1. Maybe you'll see something at CES as early as CES. So, like a month and a half, I think would be the earliest, but definitely by March, I think they'll announce it. And I think you'll see the first deliveries Q1 of 25.
So just about a little more than 12 months.
I mean, it's a long way from homologation unless they
I'll give you
just,
12 to 18 months if I'm taking
yeah,
18 to 24.
earliest. I think earliest.
Okay. All right.
By the
Let's move
time they
on.
crash test it and everything else,
Yeah, that's, I
mid to
mean,
late
there's,
25.
yeah, but I'm curious, very, very curious. Let's see what happens. So a third story here that we're diving deeply into is really good piece by Juan Diego Salamin Mojica. Very bad.
Just say Juan Mojica.
Sorry, Juan. I'm just gonna say Juan. Juan lives in Colombia. He's covered the South American EV market as it's trying to sprout extremely superbly well for us, like just doing a phenomenal job. Can't give enough praise to what Juan's doing. this article must have taken a lot of time and work and research. So he's looking at how competitive early EVs are in Mexico and Colombia. That's because of recent events, and also because he's just keeping an eye on this market and basically once in a while is doing these kind of updates. So what he does is he looks at the pricing and compares it to similar ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles. In the case of Mexico, he notes that BYD and Great Wall Motors with the Aura 03, the Aura, one of these Aura Cat, they do not calling it a cat in South America. Maybe cats are not as popular.
Well, they'd have to call it the Aura Gato.
Yeah, yeah, it's the Aura Good Cat, but
Right.
they just calling it the Aura 03 or Aura 3 in this market. But what we once deemed everybody's favorite EV, even though it doesn't sell like that, just you can't look at this and not love this vehicle. So it and the BYD Dolphin are in Mexico, and their pricing is it's not really bad, but it's not really cheap either. It's $31,000. I mean, I think that's pretty appealing, but he's
Colombian dollars.
Well, 536,000 Mexican pesos, but translated to USD, 31,000, which, I mean, as an American,
that's translated. Okay, that's fair.
I mean, that's appealing.
That makes a lot more sense.
That's appealing to me, but that's still quite expensive in Mexico, and especially for the size. So still though, I could look at these pictures all day. I love this car. So what he did is he compared these two vehicles to what he considered comparable ICE vehicles on the Mexican market, the Chevrolet Aveo and Kia Soul. And you can see that they're still not close to price parity on upfront costs. Of course, there's lower total ownership costs and all that, but his argument is basically until they're near price parity or at price parity, you can't expect a lot of EV sales in these markets. They're too price sensitive. Interest rates are higher in these markets, which makes upfront prices more. The differences in upfront price more extreme for a buyer, because you're going to end up paying a lot more in interest with higher interest rates. But then his case is like once they are at price parity, boom, game over. They're going to explode in popularity, because then you're going to be past that major barrier, and then there's all the benefits. So he's just watching closely how these markets evolve in terms of price parity. That's the Mexican side. We can come back to it but I'll just quickly introduce the Colombian side. So Colombia had a Hall of the Automobile Showcase. It's kind of a big auto show, it seems like, in Bogota. It's not happened for 5 years, so it's a big revival, return to the show. And there are a number of EVs there. The Chang'an Lumen, which is, I mean, definitely in competition with the Aura Good Cat Aura 3 for cuteness and like appeal. These vehicles have appealed especially to young women in China, and you can see the marketing here sort of focused on a young mother. There's kind of typical Chinese, like idyllic on the grass with the blue sky picture. And so that's one. And the Renault Kwid E-Tech, another similar class vehicle, the BYD Dolphin Mini. So you're getting these models, and again, they're like $10,000 or more dollars higher than the Renault Kwid, the Kia Picanto, the comparable gas versions. And then we'll get into the different classes maybe in a moment, but let's just start with those general overview takes on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because we take for granted in the US that we don't have any new vehicles for sale under $20,000. Small, compact hatchbacks, sedans, things like that don't sell in the US, whether that's because of marketing, whether that's because they don't sell because they're not available. Nobody really knows.
Like
But
in general, just to clarify, in general, not talking EVs, but any type of car.
Any type of car. Well, you can't buy any type of car in the US for under $20,000 brand new. It doesn't exist. Even the Mitsubishi Mirage, which is the smallest compact little hatchback you can buy right now, is over 20,000 base. So it doesn't exist, right? And you have companies like Ford that don't sell anything that is sedan or hatchback like at all. You have Chevrolet that doesn't really sell anything like that anymore either. Stellantis used to sell the Neon, used to sell the Dart. They don't sell that anymore either. So there's really nothing that you can buy in this class in the US right now. You talk about a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic, even those vehicles are pushing $30,000. So we don't have that internal combustion $15,000 entry level car to get into. So when we talk about a Nissan Leaf or a Tesla Model S being supremely affordable, it's in a specific context. So here you have a scenario where you don't have a $7,500 tax rebate or tax credit. You don't have the, artificially limited marketplace that does not include, or that excludes, might be a better word, compact internal combustion vehicles and affordable little hatchbacks like this. So it's interesting because I think we have price parity or something much closer to price parity in the US with the government incentives and with the lack of other affordable options. But when you do go into a market like this or like Southeast Asia, where those $10,000, $15,000 internal combustion cars exist, we're still a long way off. And
where
it's
they're
crazy.
popular.
And they not only they're that, but they're popular, right? I always use that example when people talk about the Tesla Model 2 or whatever they're going to call it, that, we need a $25,000 Tesla that's going to sell like hotcakes. The most affordable new car of any brand in the US has never been that brand's best-selling vehicle. And we can go back into the mid 80s or even into the 70s and look at those records. The most affordable car is not the best-selling car in that market. So
in the market,
it's
but
a tough say.
Hasn't the Honda Civic been the cheapest and best-selling Honda at times?
No, the Accord was typically the best-selling Honda for many, many years. The CRV is the best-selling Honda right now. So it is not the case that like the Accord, or I'm sorry, that the Civic or the Fit or the HRV, which are the
Camry is always above the Corolla.
Camry's always above the Corolla. Camry's always above the Tercel, which was below the Corolla.
Oh yeah,
for many years. The Honda had the Fit, which was a more affordable version. They had the Fit, they had the CRX, which were less expensive than the Civic. They never outsold the Civic. They never outsold the Accord.
Chevy got
Ford always had, the Chevy had the Spark. It never outsold the Malibu, never outsold the Silverado. It's just not the case. You can talk about supply and demand all day long. It just means that you've looked at a textbook and have never lived in the real world.
Well, I just realized while you were talking that there's actually a cat in the stroller. It's a cat stroller in front of this Aura.
Well, if it's the Aura cat, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's even the Aura 03, although it's probably just like the license plate changed. It probably had the same picture with the Aura cat.
Yeah, they just photoshopped the license plate. Yeah. That radiation is also not visible. That sensor thing that comes out is not
really
visible.
Oh, I got to reconsider
the whole thing. You got to reconsider the whole purchase now.
I mean, it's funny when I'm sitting and listening, the things I noticed that I didn't notice before. I never noticed. It's idiotic, but their logo is like this, rounded exclamation mark. Is especially on the steering wheel. It's quite. I think it's cool, but yeah, so there's a couple of things here. I mean, he's covering it from the South American angle. I'm very curious to see how these vehicles do in South America as more of them are on the market and more availability, and as the costs come down, the prices come down. He notes some price drops that have happened in recent months to make some of the BYD models, I think, more affordable. But gosh, it just makes me think so much about like, what if somebody did bring some of these two vehicles, for example, to the US, when all the automakers have abandoned these lower cost classes. Like, they're just like, no, if you're going to buy a new car, you're not buying a cheap little one. Like, it could be like, I could just see a case potentially where it's like, because the market is so underserved, one or two good EVs in this segment could just become very popular. I mean, sort of like the Volkswagen Beetle of old, like this I think that if they're cheap enough, and decent enough. But
I think that it's a very compelling argument. And I think if you have a limited understanding of the car market and how it works in the United States, it probably sounds like a compelling case, which is why companies like Elio, companies like Aptera, companies like Dale,
I mean, you can also
companies
mention
like
Smart,
Yugo, companies like Smart, a lot of people have invested a lot of money into that exact logic. And then they get to the market and they go, oh, fudge, this doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, just be clear, like the case I'm seeing potentially, would be a surprise. I'm not saying like, yeah, just bring them to the market, they'll be popular. I'm just curious about if there could be this surprise package that finally cracked the nut. And it's like all of a sudden, all these people, young people in New York and Boston and Chicago are like, I was never going to buy a car, but I'm going to get this Lumen or this or a Cat. It's cool. It's electric. They're obviously much more climate conscious in the city and young people. And I don't know, maybe just finally, I mean, the Smart these are not far off of a smart car.
Yeah.
And the smart car is always supposed to be efficient, supposed to be appealing to. So it's like, it's not like this hasn't been tried to some extent, but you still wonder like if it would be possible. But looking back at his analysis, so he goes sort of not exactly car classes, but types of cars, and he does the same thing. So here he's looking at, and this is for the Colombian market where he's based, looking at city cars, and he highlights these EVs that he's going to compare to gas versions. And so we've seen this list already earlier. So you've got the BYD Dolphin Mini, which again, like I just heard of the Dolphin. I don't remember hearing of the Dolphin Mini, but it just shows how differently tailored you have to be for different markets. But these are $24,000 EVs, 24, 25,000, 22,000 on the Changan E-Star, but they're still 10, almost double or sometimes double the price of the gas versions in these segments. So it's like, it's very hard to be competitive. If you go up to the hatchback version, the BYD Dolphin, the MG4, they're still like 10 to 15,000 more than the gas versions. If you get into the crossover market, it's still the same kind of price gap. I mean, it becomes less significant as you go up market, because $10,000 is less significant to an up market buyer than a down market buyer, but they're still challenged. So, he's tracking like when these finally, oh, look, there's our cool gift wish book that Joe put a lot of time into. So, I mean, he's clearly like eager for the improvements, the lower cost EVs, which he's sort of documenting as they come out. That's what stimulates these articles. But, we're just still so far away from where it needs to be for these to become really popular in South America.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, where you have less expensive options, the price difference is going to be a greater percentage of this. If you're talking $10,000 or $15,000 on top of a $15,000 car, it's prohibitive. You're talking $15,000 more on the price of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, that's an option package. So, yeah.
But that's Juan's basic final
that's
thoughts
his whole thing,
basically, which is that it's not nearly enough. So a couple short ones. This is to wrap up. This is an off-grid solar powered EV charging station that comes from Desmond Wheatley, who was early in this field. Some of the first EV charging stories I did were about him doing this kind of thing, based out of California. And one of my favorite presentations I've ever seen in clean tech, he made this really good presentation in case that, like if you look at the history of humanity, first we didn't know how to burn stuff. Then we learned how to create fire, and we burned stuff, created fire for heating and cooking. And now we're at the next phase where we learn to heat and cook and power transportation without burning stuff. It's like, so if you put it in that kind of time frame, it's like the switch we're making to charging our cars on sunlight, charging our cars with sunshine, with
Charging our
electricity,
homes on solar sunshine.
powering this stuff without burning anything. It's like, we're on step 3 of this very long timeline if you look at it in that way. So I love anything he does, but he's got this cool, you transport these solar panels, portable solar panel charging stations on a truck like this, set them up, and boom, there you go. You got off-grid solar powered EV charging. Really, really appealing for a lot of underserved markets. Of course, it can't be cheap, but yeah. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really hung up. My brain is completely shut down to what you said after Wheatley's comment, because you and I have talked about this before, where I've said to you, you have to write about this stuff as if it's the first time somebody's ever encountered it. And we've talked about how hard that is, because we've been doing this for 15, 20 years, talking about clean tech and climate tech and city planning and bike lanes and all of this stuff, as we have been. And it's very easy to get jaded. But if, he put that in a really good context, it took us 10,000 years of burning stuff to get to the point where we don't have to burn stuff anymore. So like, maybe we got another 1,000 years to go before we can really start feeling jaded about this very dramatic transition in human life on this planet, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's maybe my favorite clean tech presentation ever. Couldn't find it anymore when I looked for it a few years ago. Like, it was not online anymore.
Well, call Wheatley and see if he'll send it to us.
And I was just, when I saw the story, I was like, oh, this is a cool story. Let's talk about this. And then when I was going through it, I was like, oh, this is that guy. I was like, I couldn't even remember his name for years. I was like, who was that guy? And I was trying to find who it was. So it's really just jumped out to me. But again, and this is like solar powered EV charging stations. They've been around. They're nothing new. It looks to me like he's trying to make them more mass producible, where you could roll them out, you can deliver them easier, you can set them up easier. I mean, clearly targeting markets where you don't have another easier, cheaper supply of electricity and charging. It's still like, I mean, I would love to see these all over the world, but it's still like, it can't be easy to produce these at a very affordable cost and ship them. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what can be done with it.
Yeah, agreed. Especially if you have something like a battery storage underneath that thing, it's just gonna, because you could trickle charge this thing, especially you're out in the desert where here's where there's a market for this. Let's take a step back for a minute. You're out in Wyoming, you're out in Minnesota, you're out in North Dakota, you're on a highway, and there's not a lot of traffic, state road, something like that. But there's enough distance between two major areas that you want to have a DC fast charger for EVs. Something like this in a low traffic area that can trickle charge a battery that's placed underground. You go and plug in the EV, and it just womps down the power from the battery at a high speed, and then goes back to trickle charging with the sun. I think something like that could be tremendously effective and much more cost effective than dragging out a massive utility investment like a substation or additional energy production to power the mandated DC fast charger every 50 miles in a place like this. I think the regulators in Alaska, Wyoming, Northern Canada, they should really be looking at this. And I think like anything else, as solar prices drop, battery prices drop, the price of this thing will drop, and it'll become much more practical.
Yep. And the last story here is one I was clueless what this story was when you sent me the note about it. I was like, I don't understand what this is. And then all your takeaways, conclusions, like this is a different world for me. So I'm just gonna sit back and listen to what you have to say about this news, which is
fantastic. Get back there, co-host.
It was like my favorite kind of co-host.
My favorite kind of co-host. I could just do this show for an hour and a half by myself. Serial One was a real watershed moment in the world of e-bikes, because it was Harley-Davidson that launched Serial One as kind of a greenification of the company under its previous CEO. That's the same CEO that launched Livewire, the Livewire EL1 I'm sorry, ELW was the designation of that.
You're saying
So
the new CEO is the same one who launched the live wire.
no, 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 no,
The
no, no,
old
no.
CEO did the live wire,
Yes, the old
and then
CEO launched this e-bike. He also launched an electric scooter concept that was very similar to the old Harley Topper. This was a big deal when they launched the original Livewire. They were talking about
okay, okay.
electrifying Harley Davidson. They got rid of that guy. Harley Davidson really resisted this. The core buyer, and that's a Harley Davidson term for core buyer. The core buyers were not interested in the Livewire. It was way too expensive, I think, for a lot of people to come into the brand as new riders, which is why they spun it off into its own Livewire brand separate from Harley. And Serial One was part of that. It was part of the electrification, decarbonization efforts of the previous CEO. And they build a great bike. They have wonderful cable management. Aaron Frank, those guys, Jason Huntsman have been good friends of Clean Technica, and they've been on the podcast, and we've talked to them several times. And they've done a really great job with these bikes and building out a quality product. However, the association with Harley Davidson has always been their number one selling point. I don't know why you would buy a bike like this over a Specialized or, a high end Trek or something like that, except for that Harley Davidson association. Well, now Serial One has been spun off. Harley Davidson sold them, which, despite the fact that they make a tremendous product, I really question whether or not that was the right move for the brand, because I frankly don't know how they survive without the Harley Davidson Association.
I have
That's it.
nothing extra for me. So if anything more to say, or that's the show.
That's the show, man. I don't know who's going to spend $5,000 on a Serial One unless there's a Harley connection.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would add is you did this e-bike guide for Clean Technica, and you would joke that there's like another e-bike company every week popping up. And
There
there's
is.
constantly
There
new
is. I have
e-bike
actually
companies.
stopped updating the thing because it was literally every week I would have to add one or two, drop one or two off the list. It was crazy town.
So for me, it's like it's such a difficult market because of that, because there's so many options, and there are, a couple of brands that maybe that stand out to people as historically popular bike brands, and that maybe have gotten really big in the e-bike market from marketing or something else that you see. Like I just saw Electric, which sponsored our gift guide. I just saw one on the street on the way home. Someone was driving an electric trike, and I was like, oh, I know electric. I see it here and there, like a few e-bike brands that seem to be more popular than the rest. But in general, if like, I feel like to be a really successful, I don't know, I just feel like there are so many options on the market, like you need to stand out in some way. And to me, this just doesn't jump out as, oh yeah, that's the e-bike I need. I don't know.
Again, what
I don't
what
know.
made it
It's
stand out
yeah.
was the Harley Davidson connection. That if you were a Harley guy and you loved Harleys and you thought they were cool, but you already had a road glide or whatever it was in your garage, and you were looking for an e-bike, you could go and get yourself a Harley e-bike, and it was awesome. And that's
Yeah.
still true, I guess.
So
But
we will probably never cover Serial One again, but
we will probably never cover Serial One again.
there you go.
That's exactly right. Because and that's not a dig on Serial One. It's simply stating that I don't think they're gonna make it very long. It's not a question of like we're making a choice to not cover them anymore. I think their market differentiator was the Harley connection, and without that, they're done. There was a very similar thing happened. There was a motorcycle company that was started by Eric Buell in the 80s, and it was a Harley Davidson engine with a sport bike built around it. It was a very advanced chassis, very aggressively styled vehicle. I had a Buell, I had an XB9, great little bike. Well, great. It's kind of crappily built, but it had a cool aluminum frame with great welds on it. It was a great bike in the way that I consider things to be great. Um, it was a fun little bike, but somewhere along the way, he started believing his own hype. and he decided that the reason he was successful was not the Harley-Davidson connection. The reason he was successful was because of his superior chassis geometry, his superior frame welds, his superior styling. And they went and they moved to a Rotax dual overhead cam engine from the Harley engine. And it was a vastly superior product. It was faster, it was more reliable, it was quieter. It was in every conceivable objective way a better bike, but it wasn't a Harley. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, nobody cared. And Buell went away. And this is what's going to happen to Serial One. Nobody's going to care anymore.
Before someone sues us, just again, you said this is a really good bike. Like, it's a really good bike, really great.
It's a fantastic bike, but it's a fantastic bike, and there's 40 other companies making great bikes.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard. All right, well,
good luck to them. For them. Good luck to them.
All right, have a good day. Cheers.
Peace.
Go touch a Cybertruck.
Go touch it.
Peace.
Touch it with your mouth.